Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I was hoping that we were going to have the laser drummers that we had earlier for Malcolm's first panel, but I think they've skipped those this time. We've got a really exciting panel today. My name's Alissa Ostrove. I'm the Chief of Staff at CryptoCompare. We are a market data provider based in London. We only have 15 minutes today, so in the interest of time, I'd like to invite my panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their firms.
Hi everyone. I'm Mriganka. So out of the 15 minutes, I think Malcolm and I can take 5 minutes each for our introductions and then spend like another 5 on the panel. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Merkle Science. We do blockchain analytics to detect crypto crime. We provide compliance solutions to crypto companies and financial institutions. It's forensics for government agencies and investigators.
Malcolm Wright, so I'm Director of Reg Affairs for GBBC Digital Finance, which is the world's largest member body for crypto. So we have everything from financial institutions who are members through to crypto firms, really looking about how you build best practices. So whether that's best practices in crypto or best practices in blockchain, it's really there to provide that forum. And advocacy with regulators and global bodies such as IOSCO or FATF and people like that.
Great. Well, let's get into it. Over the last couple of years, we've seen really an exponential rise in the number of different blockchains in the crypto ecosystem. So the landscape of interoperability has become a key component to improving user experience in DeFi. This has led to many solutions, including side chains, blockchain routers, cross-chain bridges, and we've seen a lot of issues recently as a result of this. After all, a network is only as secure as its weakest link. In your opinion, what are some of the challenges that the industry faces in creating an interoperable crypto space?
In terms of interoperability, I think the first challenge would be a technology challenge. All these blockchains work on different types of technology. They have a few things in common, but a lot that's different. So like creating something where you can go from one blockchain to the other without a central body could be complicated in that sense. The second complication of interoperability is that I think not all of these parties work together, so they don't actually collaborate with each other. So you need like third-party providers. Bridges are typically, like a lot of them tend to be third parties, or only some of them are by like a key blockchain network as such. So that's another major complication of interoperability. And the last one obviously is the fact that everything is global, everything is digital. So accounting for just differences across the globe and coordination, that's the other major complication when it comes to interoperability.
I think from my side, I'll pick on two. I mean, I agree with everything that Rick said there. First one is actually regulatory interoperability. So we can't have harmonization of regulations, but there's just so much divergence right now between different regulators looking at different things. There should be some level of ability to move across borders or to work across borders, because it is, as Rick said there, it's global. We have to be able to operate across global borders. So how do we start to get those conversations taking place? The second one's actually a little bit more close to my heart because I've spent a lot of time involved in this, which is this whole travel rule, which is SWIFT for crypto. And it's an example of there's a number of different ways to solve this, a number of different solutions out there. None of them can talk to each other. I think as the previous speaker said on the previous session, you know, there's some great marketing. You put blockchain after the name and all of a sudden your shares jump. It's actually kind of similar. You say, hey, yeah, we're interoperable, but actually what does that really mean? So there needs to be this coordination, this coming together, so that we can solve these problems together. Because I think if each of us is isolated in our own little bubble, then we kind of miss the point and we end up with a divergent world that just doesn't come together to solve things.
So you guys have raised a lot of interesting points. I think one we haven't touched on yet is security, and it's certainly one that's top of mind at the moment. Is this our main concern for interoperability at the moment, and is this likely to change in the future?
Well, I think I'd agree with Malcolm. I think regulations is probably the primary concern. But so security, I mean, for one component of interoperability, that's bridges. I think the tech aspect of it, security is a big problem. Most technologies that focus on interoperability are new, like they would at most be less than 2 years old. So on account of that, because of the fact that they are cutting edge, innovative, that increases their surface area to attack, nothing like this has existed before. So it's very difficult to make them fully secure because you can't even predict the type of attacks that they will face.
I'll go back to my travel rule example, mainly because it's the thing that keeps me awake at night. If you are an exchange, if you're a custodian, you have to share originator and beneficiary information between your counterparties. That's just the way the whole system, the whole ecosystem is going to work. But for me, I see huge risk in that. And I look at a lot of the marketing and say, hey, yeah, you can do it this way, it's going to be wonderful, it's all going to work nicely. But actually what we're creating is this store of a problem. I'm very worried. I'm very worried about that level of the lack of governance that's going with that and the lack of thought. I've been involved in IT security for quite some years in various different roles, but actually seeing this now, it's like we've got to fix this before the problem happens, because once it happens, it'll be too late. So for me, I think, yes, it's one of those things at the top of the pile. That, and I think as we already mentioned, just that general awareness that if you're building solutions, you have to sort of lock the gates before it gets out there. A firm I used to work for, a little while ago, we looked at how long does it take for a new product to be exploited. And then, I'm going back a few years now, then it was around 7 weeks before somebody would try and exploit it. Now I think we're down into much shorter time frames, so there has to be this real focus on security across all levels.
Mriganka, you touched on cross-chain bridges. Obviously, these are a fundamental tool to achieve interoperability. This year, we've had a number of high-profile attacks, Nomad, Ronin Bridge, Horizon Bridge, just to name a few. I was wondering if you could go a little bit deeper in terms of what we can do to mitigate the risks of these types of attacks.
Sure. So just like an introduction to bridges for all those who are new to it, bridges help you transfer funds from one blockchain to the other. They promote interoperability between blockchains. Almost all large bridges have been hacked. It's literally the smaller ones that are less prominent that have not been hacked. Now, in terms of the types of attacks, it varies. Like Ronin, Wormhole are the two biggest ones. I think both of them were like a $500 million and a $300 million attack. There's sometimes it's validators, like there are these entities validating transactions on bridges. And sometimes there's other types of attacks where there's fake deposits, false deposits, and that causes an issue. Now, what would help with, I guess, increasing security in bridges? So number one would probably just be maturity, right? So to give you an example, the first time in the world that a bridge was actually built, like I mean like a physical bridge, it probably wasn't the best, and there were multiple points of failure, right? So as the industry matures, there's multiple bridges that are operating, and there's maturity, then you kind of know the vectors of attack there. Number two would essentially be regulation, right? The more regulation, governance, even to that extent, some amount of self-governance that becomes a standard in the industry, right? So I know Malcolm works for a lot of these regulatory bodies. If they come up with more guidelines on how bridges can have self-governance, that would lead to better security on these bridges. And number three, again, is the last problem is like really big as well. There aren't enough specialists in the space, right? There's literally less than 10,000 people who know about the space. Most new people who come into the space have to learn about it. So you can't have someone who's been there, done that, because this is purely new technology, right? So I'd say these are the three areas that need to be addressed. So education would probably lead to more people knowing about it in that sense.
So is there anything you would advise your clients to do in the event of an attack?
So I think the process is fairly simple. Whenever there's an attack, number one, be very transparent about it. I think a lot of bridges, bridge hacks, like they try and wait till everyone knows about it, or they're not very transparent in terms of what happened, how it happened, because they're afraid that their brand will get damaged. That never works, because if customers have lost money and you can't give it back to them, everybody will know anyways. Number two, engage with law enforcement, get a blockchain analytics provider like Merkle Science or any of the others. So, and a lawyer, of course. So all these three pieces are essential for you to help in retrieval of funds and making sure that you limit the damage, right? So those would be the primary two steps you take if your bridge protocol gets hacked. Yeah.
Thanks so much. I want to go back to this issue of regulation, and obviously, we're really in an era now of more regulation than ever before, particularly on the DeFi side this year with Tornado Cash sanctions. We have the EU putting its final touches on MiCA right now, and we have FATF's travel rule. I was hoping, Malcolm, you could walk us through the travel rule and what its key components are.
Yeah, sure. I think I kind of touched on it a little bit, but the key for me, I think, is that this is something that's going to apply to CeFi and DeFi. So just if you're in DeFi, it doesn't mean you're escaping it. It's coming. The whole ecosystem, if you are transferring value, then you're likely to get caught in it unless it's going to an unhosted wallet. And even those unhosted wallets, to a certain degree, are going to be, let's look at another word, compliant. So we're moving into this world of best put responsible innovation. And that will cover a whole range of things, whether it's security or consumer protection, as I spoke about earlier, and things like that. But travel rule really requires you've got KYC, and you can transfer that information as needed to the opposite side. What are we actually trying to solve for here? It's one of two things. One, can you detect and find are there people on your network they shouldn't be doing what they're doing or on your platform? And the second one is, if law enforcement come to you with a legitimate request, can you respond to it and make that information available? Who are the parties to that transaction? Who is on both ends of that transaction to then be able to say, I can give you that information, and then they can take their further actions they need to. That's the real underlying part of travel. That's what it's all about. It's there for that. Now, I mentioned earlier about data privacy and security. I've written a whole load of stuff on that on LinkedIn. For me, I think it is just very important that we're driving this in the right way, that we're really getting that privacy security right, but at the same time we're achieving those goals of how do you keep the bad actors out of the system? How do you allow legitimate trades, legitimate investments to take place, for legitimate tokens to grow and develop and everything like that, but at the same time you can close the gate almost to poor behavior.
Thanks so much for that. So we've just got, I think, a couple of minutes left here, but I'd love to ask both of you, and you might have some different vantage points here. How do you help institutions comply with changing regulation in the space, and what kind of regulatory support might we need to enhance interoperability going forward?
Great. I think the approach would have to be twofold. The primary concern here is, of course, collaboration. So there needs to be very active collaboration between the multiple players in the private sector, even the competitors, as well as regulators across different jurisdictions. So that would help with interoperability and even security from that sense. The more collaboration, the more education there is about the space, because it's just a very new space. And the second, I think, key thing that would help is just more regulation coming in, more clarity, or just more work around what some sort of guidelines are. I think that would help the space a lot as well.
I think collaboration is the key word here. It's what we do at GBBC Digital Finance. It's about collaboration within the industry, so talking to one another and actually coming to some sort of alignment on things, but then also that's public-private partnerships. So how do we engage with law enforcement? How do we engage with legislators, who are the first point of contact for regulation, and then regulators who supervise and license the behaviors and everything thereafter. So it's about how do you bring everybody to the table at once, and then determine what's the best way forward. How do we actually achieve the goals we want to achieve to make the system more secure, more robust, without really stifling growth, and allow the projects to continue to grow and develop, and this whole ecosystem to thrive.
I think you both hit the nail on the head there with the collaboration piece. I think we're just about out of time here, but I want to thank both of you so much for a great discussion. Thanks everyone for being here, and reach out to these two after the panel to collaborate.
Thank you.
Thank you.